Hey there, welcome back. Glad to have you here. Today we've got something pretty unexpected making waves in Washington. It's not another tax refund. It's not a COVID-era relief package. It's a new proposal that could potentially put $600 directly into your pocket. And here's the kicker. The money wouldn't come from income taxes or emergency funds, but from tariffs. Yes, tariffs. The fees the U.S. places on imported goods, which usually just vanish into the general federal budget. But this new idea flips the script. What if that revenue was returned to American households instead of just being absorbed by the government? That's exactly what this plan is aiming to do. And guess what? It's already catching serious attention, including from former President Trump and plenty of working-class families across the country who are asking, wait, could this actually benefit me? Now, this isn't some temporary government perk or a one-time economic boost, at least not in how it's being positioned. This is being framed as a new kind of stimulus, only this time it's not tied to national emergencies. Instead, it's linked to trade policy, a complete reimagining of how tariff revenues could be used to support American households. Traditionally, tariffs are tools used to regulate international trade and protect domestic industries. But under this proposal, they'd function almost like a national dividend, a way to share the proceeds of international commerce with the public. So how would this actually work? And more importantly, who qualifies? We'll get into all of that in a second. But first, let me ask you a quick question. If a $600 check showed up in your mailbox tomorrow, no strings attached, what would you do with it? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every one of them. And hey, if you appreciate clear breakdowns like this, make sure to subscribe so you stay updated on these kinds of policy changes that could impact your wallet. All right, let's dig into the details. This proposal comes in the form of a new bill called the American Worker Rebate Act. It was introduced by Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. The concept behind it is actually pretty simple. Every time the U.S. government collects tariffs on products imported from other countries, that money would no longer just sit in federal accounts. Instead, a portion of it would be redistributed directly to Americans in the form of a refundable tax credit. Now, what does refundable mean in this context? It means you don't have to owe any taxes to receive the money. Even if you have zero tax liability, you'd still be eligible for the full rebate amount. If that sounds familiar, it's because that's how some of the pandemic-era stimulus checks were structured as well. Under the current language of the bill, each adult would receive $600, and that same amount would also go out for each dependent child. So if you're a family of 4, 2 adults and 2 kids, you'd be looking at a total payment of $2,400. Not bad, right? Of course, there are income limits to consider. To qualify for the full payment, individuals need to earn less than $75,000, and married couples filing jointly need to be under $150,000. If you're above those thresholds, don't worry, you might still get something. The payments phase out gradually at a rate of 5% for every dollar over the limit, meaning higher earners could receive smaller amounts, depending on their income. But here's where this really gets interesting, different from past government payouts. The funding source. This money wouldn't be pulled from the general tax pool or borrowed through deficit spending. It would come directly from tariff revenues, the billions of dollars collected from import duties each year. To put this into perspective, this past June alone, the U.S. brought in nearly $30 billion in customs duties. That's a record. And if current trends continue, the total for this year is projected to exceed $150 billion. So, Senator Hawley's argument is this. If we're generating that much revenue by taxing imported goods, and those tariffs are often passed down to consumers through higher prices, then why not give some of that money back to the people who are footing the bill? Former President Trump has echoed a similar idea in the past. He suggested using tariff revenue to fund rebates for working Americans, describing it as a way to ensure that tariffs benefit U.S. citizens, not just federal balance sheets. In fact, he recently hinted that a plan like this was being considered, aimed specifically at providing some relief to lower and middle-income earners. So, if you're wondering whether this is just political theater or something real, there's actual legislative movement happening here. It's more than just a talking point. It's a formal bill. It's starting to gain traction. Now, before we get too excited, let's talk about the potential downside. because while the idea of putting money back into people's hands is appealing, economists are already raising some concerns, especially about inflation. Remember the pandemic-era stimulus payments? They were a lifeline for millions of Americans, no doubt. But according to research from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, those direct cash payments also played a role in driving up inflation. Some estimates suggest that stimulus checks were responsible for nearly 1/3 of the inflation surge experienced in 2022. Everything from groceries to gas became more expensive, in part because so much money was suddenly circulating in the economy. So if we were to roll out another wave of payments, even one funded by tariff revenue, there's a real risk that it could exacerbate inflation pressures once again. More money in people's pockets often means more demand for goods and services. And if supply doesn't keep up, prices tend to rise. That's the balancing act lawmakers will have to weigh. Short-term relief versus long-term economic stability. Is this kind of rebate a clever way to give Americans their fair share of tariff revenue? Or could it be a well-intentioned move with unintended economic consequences? Only time and more debate in Congress will tell. But one thing's for sure. This is a new take on how trade policy could directly impact your personal finances. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this is a smart way to use tariff revenue? Would you support a bill like this? And again, if you like content that breaks down complex topics in plain language, hit that subscribe button. I'll be covering this story and others like it as they unfold. Thanks for watching. And I'll see you in the next one. So let's talk about something that's not getting enough attention, but could impact your finances more than you might expect. It's about tariffs, government payments, and the real cost of the things we buy every day. Here's the deal. When government spending increases, especially through direct payments or rebates, that tends to boost consumer demand. People have cash in hand, which usually means more people are out spending it. That added demand can push prices up, particularly if supply chains are still struggling to keep pace. And while global supply issues have improved since the peak of the pandemic, there are still some weak spots in distribution, manufacturing, and shipping that haven't fully bounced back. And this isn't just a theoretical concern, it's backed by data. The Tax Foundation recently did an in-depth analysis and found that if the current tariff structure stays in place, the average U.S. household could end up paying around $1,300 more next year just in increased costs from imported goods. Think electronics, furniture, clothing. Everyday essentials, items that already feel pricey. So here's the kicker. You might receive a $600 rebate check from the government under this new plan, but quietly lose more than double that throughout the year at the checkout line without even realizing it. That's the kind of invisible trade-off most people don't notice until it's already affected their budget. And that's because tariffs are what economists often call invisible taxes. You never see them directly on a receipt. There's no line item labeled tariff when you buy a new phone or a pair of shoes. But those import duties are baked into the cost, and you're the one paying them. Now, under the proposed legislation we talked about earlier, some of that tariff money would make its way back to you, essentially a partial refund of what you're already paying through higher consumer prices. It's a roundabout system, yes, but the goal is to return a slice of that federal tariff revenue to everyday Americans. It's almost like a rebate for simply participating in the economy. Whether that's a smart policy or just clever politics depends a lot on where you stand. If you feel like the federal government rarely shares the benefits of economic policy with regular people, you might see this as a long overdue move, a rare instance where something actually comes back your way. But if you're already overwhelmed by the rising cost of rent, groceries, gas, and other essentials, that $600 might feel like too little, too late. And keep in mind, this isn't a done deal. The American Worker Rebate Act is still just a proposal. Like any piece of legislation, it has to make it through debate, negotiation, and likely amendment before becoming law. And there will be resistance. Some lawmakers are already skeptical, especially fiscal conservatives who see this as another example of government overspending. They'll argue it's a handout we can't afford. Others, including some progressives, might say the flat trade approach isn't targeted enough, and that those billions in tariff revenue would be better spent on infrastructure. public education, or expanding access to healthcare. Still, the bill's supporters have a solid argument. This isn't welfare. It's money that consumers already paid indirectly, now being returned, not given. That distinction is central to their case, and what makes the whole thing even more appealing for many is its simplicity. You wouldn't need to fill out a long application or go through layers of red tape. If you filed a tax return in 2023 or 2024, or even if you received a Social Security benefit statement, you could be eligible for the rebate. There are a few added details worth knowing, especially for families. Military households would receive some additional flexibility. If only one spouse has a valid Social Security number, a household can still qualify for the rebate as long as one of them is serving in the armed forces. Adoptive families can also use an alternate taxpayer identification number for children, ensuring those kids are included in the payout. It's a small detail, but an important one for the families it affects. Another key point, the proposed payments wouldn't be subject to federal offsets. That means if you owe back taxes, defaulted on student loans, or have outstanding federal debts, this rebate check would still come to you in full. That could be a lifeline for many families stuck in tight financial spots who might otherwise see their support garnished. And let's not ignore the timing. This proposal is being floated in the middle of an election year, which is no coincidence. It's part of a broader political push to appeal to working and middle-class voters, particularly those who feel left out of recent economic gains. The messaging around the bill is centered on fairness, hard work, and giving people their share of the wealth generated by trade policy. It's being positioned as a way to make tariffs work for ordinary families, not just corporate interests or trade strategists in Washington now. A question many of you may be asking, is this a one-time deal, or could it happen again? Right now, that's uncertain. Whether this becomes a recurring program depends on a few things. How much tariff revenue the government continues to collect, whether that revenue holds steady or drops, and perhaps most critically, whether this rebate idea becomes politically popular enough to survive future administrations and Congresses. If it catches on with voters and proves to be a meaningful boost for households, there's a chance it could evolve into something more permanent, a sort of trade dividend model where the benefits of international commerce are returned to citizens routinely. That would represent a pretty significant shift in how we think about tariffs, taxation, and economic redistribution. It would essentially turn import duties into a source of direct public benefit, not just federal income. It's a bold vision, but it's not entirely out of the question. There's also overlap with other proposals being discussed. For example, you might have heard about Trump's idea to create a $1,000 investment account for every newborn born between 2025 and 2029. That's part of a separate plan. But the thinking is similar. Use national economic policies to directly build household wealth, rather than just grow the economy in abstract numbers. If some of this feels unfamiliar, that's understandable. We haven't really seen economic ideas framed this way before, but it's part of a larger trend, connecting big-picture global trade policy directly to the financial realities of everyday Americans. So if you care about how national policies affect your paycheck, your grocery bill, or your ability to save and invest, this is a conversation worth following closely. And if you found this breakdown helpful, go ahead and tap that like button and subscribe for more content that takes complex policy issues and explains how they actually show up in your daily life. If you've got thoughts on this rebate plan, whether you're for it, against it, or just want to know more, drop a comment below. What would you do with an extra $600? Thanks for spending time with me today, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.